In today's episode of Locked On Pistons podcast, we are joined by the Detroit Pistons beat writer for The Athletic, Hunter Patterson, to talk about the Pistons potentially reevaluating their plans ahead of the trade deadline, just the overall vibes around this team right now. Talk about that today's episode, Locked On Pistons podcast. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I am your host, Koo Cahill. You can find me over on Twitter at Koo Cahill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button. We are now under 700 subscribers away from 10,000 subscribers. That's our goal by the end of this season. Go over there, head over there. Hit that subscribe button. I really would appreciate it. Or you can leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Also, head over to LockedOnDaily.com. Type in your email, and you'll get a Locked On Pistons daily newsletter along with your Locked On Pistons daily podcast. I've heard a lot of great things from all of you guys that you guys have really enjoyed those. If you haven't signed up for it already, great content. Another thing you guys can get with your Pistons daily coverage. But let's get into today's episode, man. First time we're having Hunter on the podcast. Again, you can find his work over at The Athletic. You can follow him over on Twitter as well, at Hunt Patterson _. Again, you guys probably are all aware of our past Athletic Detroit Pistons beat writer, James Edwards, left to go on to the New York, cover the New York Knicks, and Hunter has been his replacement. Has done great work this season for The Athletic. Make sure you guys go follow him and check out all of his work still, and subscribe to The Athletic. He does great stuff. So, Hunter, I appreciate you having you on. Before we talk about the Pistons, though, you let me know that you're from the Bay Area. Go ahead and just let everybody know how you're getting accustomed to the freezing cold winters of Michigan.
Yeah. First off, appreciate you having me on. You do great work as well. So it's great to be on with you. But yeah, this is my first Detroit winter. I was telling Clue earlier that I lived in Jersey for a year, although I am from the Bay Area. I went to school in LA. And so I had a little bit of experience living in the snow and weather this cold, but it's a bit different out here. So it's an adjustment, but I like it.
What about snow? So is it just how cold it is, or is it also the snow? Or is it just both? It's just getting you.
It's definitely the temperature, just because cold for me at home in the Bay and in California and everything was 40s, maybe 30 a little bit, but there wasn't any snow. So the cold is the first thing. And then the snow itself, just I need to get more prepared, honestly. I need to get boots. And my guy from the Lions, I think his name is Tyrion or something like that.
Tyrion Arnold?
Yeah, he seems like he's going through similar issues getting adjusted to the snow. So
you guys will be straight. You guys will be straight.
Yeah.
You'll get used to it. All right, let's go ahead and talk some Pistons now. So this is honestly a fun season for you to be covering. The last few years, decade really has not been great to the Pistons beat writers. It's not been fun. But this season's obviously been a lot more fun than anyone I think could have expected. It's been going really well, and maybe a little too well, to be honest, because last week Trajan Langdon spoke before a Pistons game on Pistons Live, and even he said that we're kind of ahead of where I expected them to be. I'm happy that they're, we are as ahead as we are, but we didn't really expect ourselves to be here at this moment. After that, we started getting reports from Brian Windhorst, Mark Stein, all over the place that the Pistons may be reevaluating their plan when it comes to using the cap space that they have ahead of the deadline. It seemed like it was going to be just to, acquire bad contract, acquire assets. Sounds like there's at least reports are that they're reevaluating that. Maybe they make more of an aggressive move to get better this year. How do you feel about that? Are you hearing anything with that? And where's your stance with all that?
Yeah, first off, I'm still so new. I'm not too well versed in hearing anything yet. I'm looking forward to that part of this. But based on what I've seen, I think Cade has exceeded everyone's expectations, maybe outside of his own and his teams and JB's. So with the developments in Cade's game and the things he's doing, 2 wins in Madison Square Garden this season, I think the front office, maybe pressure wouldn't really be the right word. He is 23. It's not like he's on the later end of his prime. I don't even think he's in his prime yet or even close to it. So I think the better he's getting, the more the front office is like, okay, maybe we need to try to maximize on what he's doing now and not take such a laid back, well, not laid back either, but not take an kind of stand pat approach. So I think the better Cade plays, the more likely the front office could be to eventually do something to be a little bit more competitive.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, I think I not only do I think Trajan didn't really expect the team to be as good as they are right now. I don't think obviously they believed in Cade because they gave him the contract they did. But I wonder if they really thought that he would be this good this fast. Like we see people talking about him being all NBA this year, like potentially
Right.
goes for third team, not just all star. Like it seemed like the goal was to be an all star this year. It seems like he's just running past that right now. He's getting all kinds of crazy PR push. So
Yeah.
it does have to do, with how Cade's playing. Do you think, in your opinion, do you believe the injury to Jay and Ivy should have any impact on what they decide to do at the deadline?
Yeah, I would not be too overly aggressive, I guess, to try to occupy like a secondary ball handler, someone who can fill that role as someone to kind of create their own shot and create for others while Cade isn't on the floor. Just because Ivy is, I believe he's also 22, 23-ish, something in that ballpark as well. He's so young. He was in the midst of his best season so far. He was starting to look super confident in his three ball. We all know how athletic he is. If he can kind of hone in on that defensively as well, he could really be I think, two-way kind of guard. So I think you don't want to get to a point where you're like, do we even what do we do with Jaden? Depending on who you bring in. So I would be a bit more cautious and definitely have Jaden in the back of my mind because he is on track to be a really nice two guard, I think.
So I just want to give you guys a heads up. Hunter, this is your first time on the podcast, so you don't know about this already. But I already know people are going to the comments and saying this. So I recently had a guest that's been on the show many times, but they always wondered. Apparently, they didn't know this, but they always wondered why I'm always looking this way. And
Mhm.
I had to explain it and then my listeners always make fun of me about it now. So my monitor is over here.
Got
I'm
you.
looking,
Okay.
I'm looking, I'm looking at you, and I'm looking at the screen. My camera's right here, but I can't have my monitor right in front of my camera because then you won't see
Right.
me. So it's like it's a never-ending battle that I go through. I'm trying to figure out the best way to go about it. So I just want to give you the heads up. I'm
It's
not,
all good. You see, I'm like still kind of barely new to my apartment. I don't even have anything up on my walls yet, so I'm
well,
ready to getting my background set up too.
you know how boys are, man. You feel me?
Yeah.
We need is a chair, a TV, and an Xbox, and we're
Right.
we're good. But I didn't want to give you that head. Like I did have, it's Bryce Simon of the Pistons Pulse. We had him on the podcast a ton. He's like, I've always wondered, are you paying attention to me? I'm like, dude, you've been on the podcast like 30 times. You never thought that you thought I'd just been ignoring you all the time, but whatever. I
Oh
just want
yeah,
to give
we're locked in. It's all good. No pun
you.
intended. Shoot, or locked on. You know.
But the next question I had for you was, you brought up the secondary ball handler being something that maybe they could go out and inquire whether they should or not. Do you think that if you were told, okay, they're going to go the more aggressive route, they're going to go add a piece, what piece would you think, or would you say they should go after? I think the two main pieces that are discussed in the Pistons community is the secondary ball handler that you're talking about, someone else that can create outside of Cade, or it's a starting center. I think those are the two spots that a lot of Pistons fans have talked about. Would you go a different route, or is that one of your answers as well?
Yeah, I mean the secondary ball handler now feels especially important because of Ivy being out, obviously for however long he's going to be out. And Sasser, he had some good minutes. I know some people maybe are not as high on him, and but you do, I think, want someone who you can for themselves and others. And I think the team is confident in him. JB is confident in him, but maybe someone possibly a little bit more experienced. I don't necessarily have a name. If you're doing like best case scenario, if you're not really factoring in Jaden and you're just like really trying to home run hit, I think I saw you may have even mentioned on Twitter about like Ant Simons. He's incredible, but it's, only one basketball on the floor. You don't want to take away from what Cade is doing. So there's a lot of possibilities, but I'm not even sure on just one name.
All right, fair enough. So if you had to take a guess before we move on, if you
Mhm.
had to put your hard-earned money, do you think the Pistons make a move that involves us getting assets, Or do you think they make a move that involves bringing someone to the team that helps them try to get to that top 6 seed? Which route do you think they are going to end up taking?
I think unless they can acquire somebody without having to give up a core piece, then it might be more assets. Just considering the fact that, for one, Ausar is still working his way back into conditioning. The team is more healthy now, obviously outside of Jaden, than it has been, it seems. So I think they want to continue to give this healthy group run to continue to build on the 7-1 start to 2025.
All right, we'll see what happens. This trade deadline is less than a month away. It's the first week of February, I believe, like February 5th or something. So we're less than a month away. We'll see what they end up doing. This is a good position for the Pistons to be in. This is a good problem to have. I don't think anyone expected them to be in this kind of situation when they're having to decide, do we want to push for 6th seed or do you just want to get more assets? Either way,
Right.
it's been a very fun season. I don't think anyone expected them to be in this kind of, fun, good predicament. So we'll see what they do. But coming up, I want to talk with Hunter about the vibes around this team. Social media has been buzzing. The social team for the Pistons has been crazy this year. Got a lot of fun videos. We've seen a lot of videos you've tweeted out of talking with Cade and talking with some of the players. The vibes seem to be extremely high. We'll talk about what it seems, or how the players are and what the vibes are around this team when we come back. When it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, I've had this ongoing problem. I just don't have the time. Between work, life, and trying to eat healthier, I was constantly feeling stressed out. I go to the grocery store, buy things I didn't need, then I'll end up with no time to actually cook. And sticking to my health goals, it was an absolute struggle too. But everything changed when I discovered Hungry Root. Honestly, it's been a game changer. It's the easiest way to eat healthy without all the stress. With Hungry Root, it's like having a personal shopper and nutritionist all in one. They take care of my grocery shopping, recommending meals and groceries based on my taste and health goals, from anti-inflammatory to high protein and gluten-free options. And the best part, every meal is ready in 15 minutes or less. I'm talking quick, healthy meals that actually taste great, all delivered straight to my door. You're going to absolutely love Hungry Root as much as I do. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box and a free item in every box for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA. Don't miss out with Hungry Root. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. That's another great way to support the podcast. You also head over to LockedOnDaily.com. Type in your email and you'll get a Locked On Pistons daily newsletter along with your Locked On Pistons daily podcast Monday through Friday every single day. Got you guys covered. All right, so Hunter, like I mentioned, this is probably the most fun season the Pistons have had since 2018-19, Blake Griffin's first full year with the Pistons. I mean, before then, probably going all the way back to 15-16 with Andre Drummond, Reggie Jackson, Stanley Johnson, Tobias Harris, actually first year with Detroit. It's been a fun year. So what are the vibes like around this team? Is it just, how great are the vibes with this team right now?
I think just initially coming in, I didn't really know too many people, really anyone in the organization. I wasn't familiar with coaches, any players really. So for them to be such a young group, I think I was looking at the roster. The median age for the team is 24, just a little bit over 24. So they're a really young group of people who welcomed me into the locker room as well as the other media members and everything. And they're all really great people. I think they mesh well as a unit, and they seem to all really care about one another, I think, which is a huge component to why they're successful this season. But yeah, I mean, after wins, Duran is constantly on aux. He has like this huge speaker that he just like carries around the locker room and just blasts music. He has a better music taste than you may expect for a 21-year-old. Like he's played some.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, he will play like older music. He was playing like Biz Markie at one point. Like he's throwing on, like, obviously some of the younger stuff, like Young Boy and all that stuff. But yeah, he'll play Biz Markie and older rappers and things that you may not expect. So he's definitely on aux at all times. But yeah, they like to have fun. They're a great group, I think.
So we've heard a lot in the off season at media day from some of the guys about the impact of some of these veterans and how much they enjoy being around them. Can you speak to that at all? Have you seen the impact of a Malik Beasley, how he gets along with the guys, how he raises them off the floor in the locker room? Not just Malik, but also I'm drawing a blank, THJ.
Yeah,
How have they impacted the locker room?
I think Malik he's arguably maybe the most competitive person on the team. So he's the one when they have the open portions of practice and shoot arounds and things. He's usually rounding guys up to have 3-point shooting competitions, and he's probably going to be the loudest person in the gym at most times. And Tobias and Tim are a little bit more quiet, and I think they're like equally lead by example the same way Malik is, but they're more kind of like, I'll let the guys come to me. And I've seen occasionally Ron or some of the younger guys, like as they're leaving the locker room, they're like, they call Tobias like Unk. And I'm like, he's only 32, but they call him Unk. And so occasionally, if it's like one of the young guys just kind of wants to check in, and I mean, if there was a read that they felt they missed or anything they feel like they want to sharpen up on, I've heard them say, I'll give you a call to either Tobias or Tim. So I think they kind of lead in different ways, and Malik is the most outspoken of the group, but they're all there for the young guys as much as they need them to be.
So Pistons fans obviously last year dealt with the one and only year of Monty Williams, and then they went on to move on from him and swallow his huge contract of like record-breaking contract
Yeah.
that Tom Gores ended up eating. But they bring in JB Bickerstaff, and again another example of people before the season even started talked about from Cleveland that he's going to set in culture and people are going to like playing for him. So far, we're recording this on January 14th. The Pistons obviously 21-19. What can you speak to the environment and culture that JB's building in the locker room and with the guys? Is there any stories, any fun moments, anything you can point to really give people an insight into how JB has run the team and the culture with the team so far?
I would say I think he approaches it mainly as a partnership rather than superior being the coach being the superior, and he allows for open conversation back and forth, whether if Cade, Duran, any of the guys, really, it's not just the starters. If they see something that maybe JB or any of the other coaches on the staff don't see, it's open for conversation. So it's not like if I do something that I see and I make the right play, coach is going to be like, why didn't you do it my way? Although like the result was what we wanted, JB would probably have a conversation with that player later on and figure out why they did what they did to understand it, and then allow them to kind of have the free reign to do those things. So Duran has been really outspoken about how much he appreciates JB's him being communicative and allowing the players to have a voice. So I think that, and then also early on in the season, there were just a ton of games. It felt like at one point the Pistons had played more games than any other team. And I think JB has done a good job of allowing them to have rest, while also when we're not resting, we're going to be in the gym and we're going to be in here working hard. And you guys know kind of what the standard is. So he spoke early on about them buying into the things that he's been asking of them, and the level of just effort that he requires on a daily basis. And I think partnership is just the best word, like I said in the beginning, where they seem to really work in tandem, the coaches and the coaching staff and players.
So, Fred Vincent, I want to ask about. Do you happen to have any fun stories or any fun moments or any interesting insight to something that you've seen from Fred Vincent this year? Obviously, everyone in the Pistons community has been like talking about building him a statue and go. Everyone knows how big,
Yeah.
how much people respect him as a shooting coach. Is there any kind of story or fun moment from this year that you can give Pistons fans in regards to him?
One of the funniest things from him was a game. I forgot. I think it may have been a game in Boston, but it was a road game for sure. And Ausar, it may have been the game where Cade went to Ausar twice, and Ausar missed the first 2 threes in the corner. Ausar hit the third one, and it was, I think, down the stretch, kind of an important moment in the game. And anytime Ausar or Ron shoot, anytime they shoot, and then anytime they make it, for sure, I look at Fred, and Fred was just on the bench like juiced, like he was ecstatic that Ausar had hit that shot at the time. And so that's just like the funniest story, I think, with him. And then aside from that, he's just really meticulous about how he approaches shooting with them. So he'll have tape on the ground about where he wants their feet to be. If they don't tuck their elbow in the right way, certain things like that, like the rep won't count even if they make the shot. So he seems to not care how long he needs to be there. Doesn't matter who he's there with. The lights could probably barely be on, and he's still really passionate about trying to get these guys to feel confident in their jumpers.
Coming up, I want to talk with you about how high you think the Pistons could actually reach this year. But before we get there, I do want to ask you, what's your favorite moment, whether it be a question and answer, a moment from practice? What's your favorite moment so far that you've had this year? Again, whether it's your favorite answer from a player or just a funny moment you witnessed or whatever. What's your favorite moment so far in your first season covering the team?
That's a great question. It's been just a whirlwind of 2 months, I would say. I got here in the middle of November, and we are now midway through January. So, man, I'm trying to think. Um, One that has like nothing to do with the players actually is so that might be a little okay. Trying to think. Um,
It can be whatever you want.
the one that I was gonna say was there was when they played at Staples. Tom was there, Tom Gores, and he called the Pistons reporters that were there. We had like a conversation with him at halftime, and yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio was just like casually sitting there, and I'm
Are you for real?
so serious, bro. I love Titanic. I'm like, this is crazy, but so that was one. But I think just I think being in the locker room after wins is maybe not like one thing, but just being in the locker room after wins and seeing how like they're adamant about not being complacent, but you can see how much these wins mean to them after everything that they went through last season. And so for me to be in my first year around this team, for them to be as welcoming as they are, and then for me to just see what it means to them to be doing what they are right now, like it's great. Like they're genuinely a close group, and they make people around them feel close as well.
Yeah, I love to hear that, man, because the Pistons, they've struggled for a minute. But again, like we mentioned in the first segment, man, the vibes around this team are just like at an all-time high right now, and with everyone involved in the Pistons franchise right now. So great to hear that. So when we come back, though, I do want to talk with you. How high can the Pistons actually reach this season? What's a realistic expectation for this team? We'll talk about that when we come back. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space always gets me back into my routine. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, Wayfair has everything you need, all within your budget. If you're currently looking for furniture, they have a huge selection that makes it easy to find pieces that fit your style and budget. My favorite part, the free and hassle-free delivery even for the larger items. Wayfair's site was so easy to navigate, and I found everything I needed to find in no time. There's something for every style and every home, no matter what your space or budget. Wayfair makes it easy to tackle your New Year's home goals with endless inspiration for every space and home style. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair. Every style, every home at Wayfair.com. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. All right, Hunter. So the Pistons are currently sitting at 21-19. They are currently in the 8th seed. They have one more win than the Miami Heat, but the Heat have played one less game than them, so they're still behind them. But as far as games, they are half a game behind the 6th-seeded Bucks. They're a game behind the 5th-seeded Indiana Pacers, and they are a game and a half behind the 4th-seeded Orlando Magic. And when you look at the wins, they're 1 win behind Indiana, 2 wins behind the Orlando Magic. So the Pistons obviously have worked their way back into this. They're playing great right now. They're 8-2 in their last 10 games. They've had multiple long winning streaks for this season, specifically within the last month. I want to bring up real quickly before I toss it to you. I want to bring up what their net rating right now is on the season. Right now, the Pistons are 18th in the NBA in net rating. They have a minus 0.9 net rating, so just below what you would call basically an even net rating. That has them right behind the likes of a San Antonio Spurs, the Indiana Pacers, and the Golden State Warriors. And if you look at just the last 10 games for the Pistons, they have the 7th best net rating in the entire NBA. If you go back even 15 games, the Pistons would end up with the 11th best net rating in the NBA at plus 1.8. So they're peaking right now. The last month or so, last few weeks, they've really been playing good basketball. But the question is this: how high can they actually reach in the East? How high do you think they could get if they maintain this level of play?
The only teams I'm confidently going to say I think are better than the Pistons today would be the Cavs, Celtics, and I just watched Cade be the best player on the floor in Madison Square Garden twice and beat the Knicks, so I have a hard time saying it's tough to say. They could finish the season with a better record. Obviously, the Pistons have some ground to make up on them to even make it competitive. But the Magic, we'll see what happens. I believe Paolo is back, but we have to see when Franz gets back and how they mesh. So interested to see how that goes. I think the Pacers are good, but I'm still taking the Pistons over them in just a head-to-head. I think Cade is the best player between the two teams, and the Bucks can always figure things out. So they're the biggest wild card there, I would say. I think Celtics and Cavs, that's kind of just they're in a class of their own. But outside of that, I mean, it really fringes. It depends on how Franz and Paolo come back. I think the Knicks in a playoff series obviously would be much more difficult to beat than they would in the regular season. But again, like I said, we just watched Cade do what he did. So the East is pretty open outside of those top two teams, I would say.
So if you had to say, if I told you the Pistons end up as the 6th seed, would you be shocked?
No.
And you think they could do that without having to make any moves?
I do. I think you don't want to get too hung up on this streak. It has been promising. You mentioned the net rating over the past like 10 to 15 games. It's impressive stuff for sure. But once teams continue to get more tape on the Pistons, just like any young team, I think it'll probably be more difficult for them as the season goes on. But the things I've seen from Cade, like there's been very few games when he hasn't at some point looked like the best player on the floor. And again, for him to be 23 years old and just kind of figuring things out, being able to have one of his first off seasons where he's not rehabbing and we see the result. Like, I think this is sustainable for him and the confidence everyone seems to have right now. I don't see why they can't sustain it. So I wouldn't be surprised about 6th seed at all.
So the question I want to ask you is this, because like you mentioned, they are riding an incredibly high streak right now, and they are playing really good basketball. The vibes are an all-time high. I'm having a lot of fun watching this team, covering this team. It's been a lot of fun. But it doesn't mean this team doesn't have some glaring holes, and they don't have some areas that they need to improve on. What's the one area that you would say they have to figure out or improve upon if they want this to not just be a hot streak and something they can actually build upon? What's one thing that you would point out that they have to improve on?
Number one thing that I've seen this season is the most glaring to me is just the turnovers. It's like they'll have stretches where they protect the ball, and then there will be a 9 or 10 turnover quarter occasionally. So I think you look at the end of games, the stats that I really like looking at for the other team are the other team's points off turnovers, because there's usually around 15, 20 that the Pistons have allowed for, and second chance points, because they give teams with offensive rebounds a lot of possession. So between sending teams out in transition when you turn the ball over and then allowing offensive rebounds, especially down the stretch, that's a killer. Like, those two things to me have been their biggest issues that have held them back the most.
So I would say the one thing that I think they have to figure out if they want to, because there's some things that are happening that I do think are sustainable, and there's some things I don't know if are really sustainable for a full season. And one of the things I think that if there's one thing that I think could bite them and really pull them back down to maybe meeting the level, or coming back down to the mean, is how they play without Cade. When
Yeah.
Cade's not on the floor, they are struggling mightily. And right now they're getting away with it because how good they're playing when he's on the floor. So they're getting away with it. I'm not sure if that's something that is sustainable enough to continue to win games like this. For example, I'll bring the numbers up here. When Cade's on the floor, they're winning game, or they're outscoring teams by 14.1 points per 100 possessions.
Mhm.
When he's off the floor, they're getting outscored by 15.6 points. That's a 29.7 point differential. That's a 29.7 swing from when Cade's on the floor to off the floor. I'm not sure if that's something that can be sustainable. I don't know if, again, they're playing great right now, not trying to bring anyone's parade down at all. I'm having a ton of fun watching. But for looking forward, I think that's the one thing they have to try to figure out. How can they sustain to where they're not just getting blitzed off the floor when Cade's not playing? What do you think is a way that, because we already talked about whether they can go and get a secondary ball handler or
Yeah.
whatever. Do you believe that there is a current solution on this team to solve that, or do you think that's something that they're probably going to struggle dealing with the rest of the year?
First off, that's a great point. I think that's something that especially, again, everything is amplified during the final minutes and late in games. But anytime Cade has to come out in the fourth quarter, it's like I'm intensely watching to see who's going to step up and who can kind of create for at least themselves.
And like you mentioned, Sasser did have 2 good minutes. I think it was like 2.5 good minutes yesterday in the fourth, where he created, I think, 5 or 7 points for himself, going at Jalen Brunson.
Yeah, and I think Sasser occasionally can give you those spot minutes, but it could be a little bit of a gamble. But based on what they have now, if you get Ausar in transition, JB has mentioned a lot of times, like, what he really loves about Ausar is the fact that his head is always up when he's dribbling. He may not be, like, obviously Ausar knows he needs to tighten his handles. So not saying he's going to be like the primary ball handler all the time when Cade's out, but if they can kind of find a way to run some point forward through him where he feels confident distributing the ball, and possibly you get him into initiating offense on his own and doing some DHOs and maybe some slip screens and things like that. So you have to get creative based on the personnel and Ivey being down at this point, but I would be interested to see possibly what Ausar could look like trying to initiate offense occasionally.
So I don't know if you know this, but you're talking to like the number one Ausar believer right here. I wanted
Oh, there we
Ausar.
go.
Like I was very, very adamant that he was the pick at 5 a few years ago. I've spoken with Ausar a few times, able to ask him a few questions over the off season. I'm talking with him about his ball handling and all that. Like, I am a huge believer in Ausar, the future secondary playmaker kind of thing.
Yeah.
Before we get out of here, I do want to ask you about that since you brought it up. Has JB mentioned anything about Ausar being more of a ball handler within the team? Because I thought that once Ivey went down, I thought for sure it was going to mean, okay, they're going to try to lean on Ausar a little bit more to try to be a paint touch and create offense, and kind of maybe not create offense for himself, but at least be that person that can penetrate a defense and play, make, and create advantages in the half court setting because of how athletic he is and how good of a processor and passer he is. I feel like we just haven't really seen that. Has JB mentioned that at all at practice, after games at all?
Not much, but I think it feels kind of similar to the front office situation where they weren't expecting Cade to be this good. So now they possibly are going to need to, or not need to do anything, but now they possibly might feel they want to get someone to be more competitive. This feels a bit similar in that I'm not sure the team expected to be this competitive this fast. And when you're less competitive, obviously you have less meaningful minutes where you can experiment and you can have Ausar try to initiate offense and be the secondary ball handler. But now that they are more competitive and trying to win games, there's maybe a little bit less time to experiment in game. And it also doesn't help, obviously, that Ausar, he was late to start the season with getting over the injury or the blood clot situation from last year. He had a cold or was like really sick a few days ago, and he's like still kind of getting over that. And so I think there's just a lot of factors kind of contributing to why maybe right now isn't the best time. But I think once he gets his wind up and continues to get in game shape, there could be more opportunities for that.
Yeah, I had heard kind of the same thing recently, that Asar's kind of just now, really, just like today, the last few days, feeling like he's finally getting to a better spot, like health wise and stamina wise, I guess, to where he kind of feels like he can do everything he wants to do. So I'm
Yeah.
interested to see if that like plays a part in maybe seeing him have a higher role or a bigger role or a higher usage on the team.
Yeah,
But
real quick before we dip out from this conversation too, like
go
there
ahead.
was a moment in the last home game. He was on the bench and they put he was on the jumbotron, and you could tell he had just got done coughing like so bad, and it was hilarious. Like he looked like he was aware that it was obvious he was coughing, and he just like wanted to get off the camera so bad. And we laughed about it after the game, but that like he's still trying to feel like over a cold basically. So
No, yeah, I was at that last game, that
okay, yeah.
last home game. He looked. I came on the podcast. I said it after. He looked horrible. Like he looked really sick. Like
Mhm.
he looked like he was like he definitely, you could definitely tell he was dealing with the sickness.
Yeah,
So I mean, he's kind of had just a rough, like, I think overall he's had a good season, but just kind of had to go through a lot. Obviously, the starts of the year with the blood clot issue,
yeah.
being allowed to come back, then coming back, then dealing with the sickness, and briefly missing a few games. Like he
Mhm.
hasn't been able to really get settled. Really,
Yeah.
he's still not really touching 30 minutes of action. Like he's still just trying to get there. So I'm interested to see if the coaching staff, once they feel like he can get there, do we start to see maybe the playbook get opened up a little more for him?
Right.
Well, that's all I've got. Hunter, you got anything else you want to mention or talk about?
No, I think I'm just super grateful to be around this team, be covering this team. I love the fact I wasn't two of my best friends actually from college are from Detroit in Michigan, and so they're big Lions, Pistons fans, and I knew how passionate the fan base was, but to now be here, see how it is at games, and just experience how hungry this fan base is for competitive basketball. It's fun to be able to write and same thing I'm sure you feel, to be able to be a part of just providing coverage on a team that the fan base wants to win so bad. So I think
Well,
that's probably just my favorite part of
well, you get lucky because you entered right at like the good part. Like you didn't have to
yes, I
like
did.
you entered with the good part happening. I had to go through the worst season in franchise history.
Right.
So, and the other beat writers, they've had to go through the downs, but it is looking
Yeah.
up and it's a good fun time to be covering the team and be around the team. So I'm looking forward to all the work you have going for the rest of the year and for the rest of your time covering the team, man. You guys can follow him over on Twitter at Hunt Patterson _. Obviously, you can find all of his work at The Athletic, where he covers the Detroit Pistons. I've been reading his stuff. Great stuff, man. Go subscribe
Thank
over there and check him out, man.
you.
Appreciate you coming on the podcast. It kind of, not so much last second, but I try to give you guys a little bit more, my guess, a little bit more of a heads up. I kind of came a little, last second for you, but
That's
you
all
made
good.
enough time for me. I appreciate it, man. This will be posted up the next day. Hopefully you guys check it out. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I appreciate all of you guys who make Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Leave a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Hit that subscribe button. We are on our way to 10,000 subscribers. Trying to get there by the end of the season. I really would appreciate it. But until next time, I'll see you guys later. That's Hunter. I'm Koo. I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.